Federalism is the division of authority between the national and subnational governments, and this is what we use here in the United States. There are some powers that belong only to the national government. There are other powers that belong only to state governments, and then there are some powers that are shared between the two. Now, this is not the only way to structure a government. Some nations have unitary systems. The United Kingdom, for example, operates under a unitary system where there is a strong national government and no independent subnational governments. So the United Kingdom does not have sovereign states. All decision, all power is concentrated in the national government in London. On the other end of the spectrum, we have confederal systems. And the best modern example of a confederacy is the European Union. While Belgium and France both belong to the European Union, they remain independent sovereign nations. And the European Union acts as a sort of loose association, a loose agreement, cooperating unit. One problem with federalism is that the appropriate division of authority is often unclear. Some powers belong to the national government, others to the state government. Sometimes powers are shared, and this makes the process very complicated when we're deciding who gets to make the decision. Now, why do we have this problem? In part, it's because the Constitution uses extraordinarily vague language. There are a set of enumerated powers, those powers that are specifically given to the national government. There are a set of reserved powers, those powers specifically given to just the states. And then there are a set of concurrent powers, these powers that both the states and the national government share. When you combine these three sets of powers, you have a system where it's not always clear where particular issues fall. To make how federalism operates in practice in the United States has changed over time. One important turning point in the evolution of American federalism was the adoption of the 16th Amendment, which allowed the national government to collect federal income taxes from individual citizens. As a direct result of Amendment 16, your national government suddenly had a ton of extra money laying around, and they could become more active, run more programs. This led directly to a series of grants and aid programs. A grant and aid program is where the national government takes some of their tax revenue and redistributes it back to the states. And they can do this in three different ways. One is a block grant. This is where the national government will give, say, $10 million to the state of Missouri to spend on education. So the state of Missouri has $10 million to spend on education. They could buy textbooks, hire teachers, build a new school. Anything related to education would work. States love these because it gives them a lot of discretion as to how to spend the money. Congress prefers working through categorical grants. And in a categorical grant, the national government will give the state of Missouri $10 million, but they're going to be more specific. They're not going to just say education. They will say K through 12 education, or they may say K through 12 science education. So in a categorical grant, there's a far more limited set of things the states can spend the money on. And finally, there are formula grants. And this is how we get funding at the state level for programs like Medicaid. There's a mathematical formula that Congress establishes. Relevant factors from the states are plugged into the equation, and at the end, a number is spit out. And that's how much money the states get to run a particular program. All of these programs are a way for the national government to influence state policy through the sharing of revenue. It shouldn't come as a surprise that grants and aid funding comes with strings attached, and these strings are known as conditions of aid. When the national government wants states to take actions, they will often use grants to do this. So for example, the national government gives the states millions of dollars every year to maintain the road and highway systems across the United States. From time to time, this money is held hostage as a condition of aid. Years ago, the national government decided that they wanted to lower the speed limits around the nation, conserve fuel, road safety, things of that nature. They didn't have the authority to mandate a lower speed limit from Congress, so they told the states that they could either lower their speed limits or they could lose 15% of their transportation funding. Because state budgets are designed in such a way that makes them dependent on long-term aid like a transportation grant, states quickly comply. There are other ways the national government can use money to influence state policy, and this is through mandates, particularly unfunded mandates. An unfunded mandate is a policy directive from the national government that requires states to take a specific action, but offers no money to help pay for it. No Child Left Behind was largely an unfunded mandate. States were required to take certain actions with regard to K through 12 education, but they were not given any funding to help pay for these changes. Sometimes states, individual states, can get out of these unfunded mandates by applying for waivers. And these are essentially permission slips from the national government to ignore a specific policy directive.